right. Well, we're really excited to be here to chat about this because it's a really important topic. My name is Jessica Lopez, as they said. My pronouns are she, her, and I have been an art and creative director in the fashion industry and tech for the last 20 years. And Karen, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes. Hi, I'm Karen. I am a visual creative director. I've been in all kind of gamuts of this industry, from publishing to editorial to entertainment, for 10 plus years. And I am so grateful. Thank you so much, Pixel, for inviting me to talk about this like really important topic and kind of timely topic right now. So
for sure. And special shout out to Daniel Jester, whose podcast we've both been on.
Exactly.
That landed us here. So thanks so much. So I think when we're talking about like diversity and inclusion, we talk about them as if they're interchangeable, but they're very different. I mean, I think in the context of e-commerce visuals, diversity can be shown in like the makeup of who you cast in your images. It can also represent like who is on your team, the diversity of the people on your team. And I think inclusion is really like the experience that your employees have in the culture of your company, and also the experience that your customers have with the culture of your brand. So without further ado, we all know this imagery, right? So Karen, let's talk about how like the power dynamics on a set could have led to imagery like this.
So coming from my experience of being on set, and again, we're coming, we were not on set. We were not part of the decision making, part of this company. Just telling from my experience of working on different types of sets, when you're coming onto a set and this concept is given to you, sometimes you don't feel empowered to say something or, to speak up, because maybe this is your first big job, or maybe it's like, oh, if we say something, they'll be mad and we'll never work with you again. Again, the buck stops obviously with the company and the people the approvers of the company. But here, it's been my experience where, I've had to push back and be like, hey, here's my perspective, where I'm coming from and my own experience, and saying, hey, this might be a little offensive. And when you kind of, we've all kind of heard around the controversy of the blame game of like, oh, we're, blaming the photo production company, which the company hired, and they were like paid to do that concept. At the end of the day, the buck stops with the company. And I think we really need to do a better job of trying to create a space that people feel seen and heard, and be not fearful to, be able to speak up and say, hey, it might not be a good idea to have a young child and possibly something that could, come across as literally child pornography, which, in US, that's like just the ultimate thing where you can get canceled, right? Like literally the cancel culture, like that's the one thing. And there's a lot of things we can get into this like particular kind of scenario, and invite, please be submitting questions, and we can maybe dig in a little bit more. But it's all about like, if there was a structure, a process in place where people felt like they were able to, speak up, they could have avoided literally what probably cost them millions on this campaign of just trying to, fix it. Backtrack and fix it. That could have been saved if someone was able to felt empowered to say, hey, maybe we should take some of these things out.
Yeah.
And that's not appropriate.
When we were talking about this initially, Karen, we were talking about how like, it's not like, it's diversity. It's a problem with diversity of the crew on the set, of the entire like company, but it's also like an inclusion culture, right? Like, is the stylist able to say something? Is the set director, is the person getting water able to say something? Like, you need to create a psychologically safe space for people to be able to come forward with concerns, so that imagery like this doesn't happen, right?
No, exactly. And it's, again, you work with different personalities, and it all kind of starts with how the person who's in charge, are they creating that safe space for people to be able to come to them and be like, hey, from my perspective in my culture, this might be offensive. Is there another way we can do this?
Right. So let's move on to a company that overcame some hardships, right? Abercrombie & Fitch. So yes. What did you think, Karen, when you first saw this kind of new leaf that A&F turned over?
I think for me, I was skeptical because, through the history of, A&F, they were, forced after lawsuits to put some diversity and inclusion in their practice. But finding out and looking at the documentary, it was just kind of for show. It's like we put someone there. They expect this one person, and I've experienced this in different companies post George Floyd, where they expect if we hire this one person over the DEI, we're gonna magically fix everything. And I think a quote that resonated with me was when I was working for a company and the DEI guy said, it's like change is not gonna happen super fast, because think of an established company like Abercrombie & Fitch. They're steeped in history of, wanting to cast beautiful, mostly white, young males and females. Basically, they've already baked the cake. And when you're trying to throw now, we want to be diverse and we want to be inclusive, it's hard to add things to something that's already baked. You have to start from the kind of ground up to really, and that comes really from the top down of really wanting to embrace those values. And what Abercrombie & Fitch came to, literally a coming to Jesus moment, is if we're going to continue and want to be successful as a brand, we got to just clean house and hire people and start embracing diversity and inclusion. And they did. And it's so surprising to me, yes, when you first kind of started it, you were like, well, they're just doing that because they want to continue and they want to make money and they want to tap into this. But they've really shown, if you've kind of followed their progress, that they have really embraced the culture and want to move forward and really be a beacon to social causes. They even Forbes magazine had named them one of those top companies last year of hey, they are trying to push that social change. And just an example of this past, this Black History Month, if you go on their Instagram, really showing that, hey, we're hiring, Black or BIPOC, designers, and we're really having them, share their voice and their concerns and really take the lead. And when you see in their, their advertisements now, and even in their kind of e-com kind of store in pages, you're seeing now diverse body types, diverse different people from everywhere that you can think of. Mm-hmm. So it's again, it didn't happen overnight, but because they embraced it and really was okay, we really want to pivot. We really want people to know that we're taking this seriously, now that people really take them, at their face value.
Yeah. And I want to go back to when you were talking about values, right? Yep. Because I think it's really easy as a company to say we wrote our core values, we're finished, right? Yep. Great. But this is obviously a process of you write the core values, and that's step one. It's step half, right? And then and the other part of it is really incorporating those values, living those values, continuous training, continuous learning. It's not enough to take one inclusion course is not going to unpack centuries of misogyny and racism and blah 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 blah, right? So it really is what you were saying, we want to create a safe space up here for the questions from the audience, but you also want to create a safe space in your company to be able to learn. You're not nobody's perfect, and this is just kind of an ever evolving landscape.
Yeah, exactly. It's everyone has biases. I have a bias. You have a bias. It's how we grew up and how everything you've been conditioned or taken in of your environment. So it's knowing that you just need to invest and know that this is like for the long haul, because it's not just a one and done where, oh, we all came together, we all talked about our feelings once or twice in a meeting, and then boom, racism is, you know, oh, we're like perfect.
We fixed it.
Yeah, exactly. It's done. No, it's like companies going and embracing. And again, you may feel like you're in a position where it's like, I don't have a voice, or I'm not empowered, or I'm not in the room, but it's just taking those little things of what can you do, kind of harping on like what I love what Max said earlier on in his talk about his brands, like Diversify Photo. I've been connected with them, like I think when they founded in like 2016. It's like, how can you or your company reach out to them, or organizations like Women Photograph, or just to try to get different voices, you know, in the pipeline,
right.
kind of like when we were discussing earlier, to, you know about opportunities. How does it work? I think for me, in my experience of being, you know, a Black photo editor, visual creative director, when I came into the field, there was hardly anybody. There was maybe one or two. I accidentally fell into this career. I loved it, but again, it was a very tight-knit circle that I could not break, and I had to kind of just forge my path. I didn't have the luxury to have a mentor. How can you be a mentor to someone if they like, hey, they reach out to you in LinkedIn and they're like, hey, can we just have a chat? I just want to know how you broke into this career, or what is this career path? How can I, work towards where you are? Mm-hmm. Taking that time. And that's why I'm so passionate about mentorship. It's like just to give them that valuable information.
Yep. Shout out to Where Are the Black Designers and Hire Black Now. Those are both really great organizations where you can find Black talent.
Yeah. And it's just like, now you sparked people's interest, and then you have someone, potentially be like down the road when they get more experience, or hey, you have like an entry level job to opening. Hey, there you go. You're diversifying just little by little by just one person, you know, step by step.
You want to talk about how A&F won, or what were their steps to success here?
And I think this can be applied to, you know, all the brands. You know, it's, you know, and from this article that I love by Marilyn, you know, they embraced diversity through and through, like truly finally embraced it. Not just Topshop. It was like, oh, we're just doing it to check a box. You see it even like woven now into their brand right now that's being presented. They also, you know, another thing, it's like no one's perfect. So just, you know, they admit it finally. Hey, we messed up. We are sorry, and we're going to show you, and we're going to prove to you that we mean what we say. And then also just adapting with the times, you know, especially coming with the buying power of Generation Z, which they are not going to take this BS anymore. Like they are like, no, we do not care. We want everybody. We want all the inclusion. We want everything, all the, you know, diversity. And then also just kind of being crystal clear on your values. I think sometimes we can start with, these are our values, and then we drift when, you know, let's say, for example, you know, when we start getting successful and you want to cater to everyone, but being really just clear of like this diversity, inclusion, you know, and equity, that is like our core brand. And we want to live that through and through every single day. It's hard, but just little by little, if you can just keep going back to that North Star, eventually your company will, you know, encompass that.
Yep. So moving on to Parade, I want to talk about Parade, who is a company that has DEI really baked into their imagery from day one. So, you know, why do you think this is resonating with Gen Z? You kind of touched on it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, when you're looking at that, and I wish I had that, like in the 90s, you know, as a millennial, like, you know, it was for me, you just saw one type of standard beauty, you know, paraded across. Here, everyone is pretty much included. You know, again, we don't have anyone, I don't know, and I don't want to make assumption that someone's not, you know, not disabled or in any way, or have any type of like, you know, kind of handicap or whatever, something like that. But, you know, when you look at that, that's like almost like there's such beauty in just seeing this array of body types and people and cultures, and just a community sense where, unfortunately, like past generations, I don't think we'll ever get there, but you see the future where we're moving towards.
Yeah, totally right. Like,
and people respond to that, and that's why they became like, you know, Parade underwear, like the kind of like the inner Instagram kind of like TikTok underwear company, but really seeing why people resonates with that, with their campaign and with their products.
Right. And how meaningful, like, you know, the intersectionality is, like seeing someone that is non-binary and also Asian, or, you know, different races. Like, it's so hard to see yourself represented when you check more than one box. And so there's something that's deeply resonating about seeing, you know, this whole array of people represented. Let's talk about our key takeaways here. So,
and again, I think for our takeaways, these are just things to start reflecting. Like, these are not like, there is no right, like, clear path on like, this is the way you solve the problem, but it's like, here are things to think about of like how maybe you yourself can, you know, be empowered to do one small thing. Because obviously, like, if you're like, you know, not in the C-suite, you know what I mean, where you can make a dramatic change like right away, like how can you, like, say as a photo studio? I love Daniel when he said he invited, you know, the students, you know, and do, you know, do a studio literally a day there. It's like, how can I invite like some people from Diversified Photo or something, or from like another school, or from like, you know, other places that may not have that, you know, access to this, to this knowledge. Like, what can you do every day? And it's like, and I think the biggest thing is just being aware. It's like, as long as you like, oh, maybe I said something that might have been a little off colored, or something that might have been between the lines, and just being aware of that, and being, you know, self-corrected, you know, and correcting yourself, and leading into, you know, DEI is, you know, everybody's responsibility. It's my responsibility to continue to grow and to continue to learn, because I don't know everything. And then, you know, culture starts from the top down, and hopefully seeing, you know, people like really demand, and especially from your audience, you know, then that's going to help shift minds a little quicker.
Yep. Hear that, top down. It's also super important to build, like we kind of touched on before, like a talent pipeline from high school to college and beyond, because, you know, when we had the conversation, I shared this with you, like when I left my last job, there was definitely a diversity issue with, you know, team makeups. And I was like, I am leaving you with a list of Black woman art directors to replace me with, because the hiring patterns here need to change. But that was a really tough thing to find, because they had to have been entry level, either junior art directors or junior graphic designers, and had worked their way up to that point. And, you know, 20 years ago, that wasn't happening. 15 years ago, that wasn't happening. So it's really important, and it's incumbent upon all of us really to like you said, find those ways to get that talent in, nurture that talent, reach out into your community, and find ways to change the future. Basically, the future is now, and we all have a hand in building it.
And I would like kind of piggyback off of that. It's like, don't be afraid to hire someone with like not a traditional background. I always like people, like, if you can hustle and you're willing to learn, and you love, you know, you want to do this. Like, sometimes those are like some of the best hires, because they're so eager to learn, and they're going to be like, you know, like your top, you know, like they're going to have your back. Yeah. But then going into our next one is like, you know, DEI is not a one and done thing. It's a constant learning process every single day. And just to continue to seek out, you know, knowledge and sources, you know, the ones that you trust, and, you know, and just continue to learn and grow from it.
Absolutely. And Gen Z and the next generation behind them, they're growing in their spending power, and they're not going to let you sleep on this. You got to wake up and do something about it. Because the thing that's been really interesting for me, I'm like a Gen Xer, so I manage a lot of Gen Z generation, and they're not like, they're suffering no fools. They're not putting up with it. They're like, I need an hour in the afternoon for therapy. And like, you need to say, okay.
Yeah, they're going to tell you. They're like, no, it's not going to work here. Bye.
It's not like sleep at your desk, eat an apple. Like, no, you've got to like, because it's, there's ableism at play. Yep. There's everything, like people have mental health. You have to accommodate people. And like, Gen Z is not having it. The next generation isn't having it. So everybody needs to get on board and get with the program. We are almost out of time. So next up is our Q&A. Do you have Q's? Because we have A's up here. No? Yes? All right. This is a good one. How have the standards of retouching changed over the past years? Let's say 2018, 17 to now.
I would say, and this is a really good question. I think we're leaning more towards, and again, coming from my background of kind of like tech, brand, and editorial, more natural, keeping it as natural as possible. I have been in situations where, and this is like recent, like 2000, like 19, 20, where, I have a conversation with an art director because, and it's not just in photography, it's also like in an illustration as well. And this was an illustration where we were working with a Black illustrator, and the art director was like, well, this skin is too dark. And this was based off of like a real person. And so, I mean, again, the art director was not like racist or did not mean any ill, intent. They just didn't understand how to phrase the question or like their ask. And it was like a teaching learning moment. Mm-hmm. And so for retouching, I think everyone is like, even like they've had to change to show more realness because of just the consumer feedback. And like, hey, why are you like making, like there was a Dove commercial. I remember that like, that got like a lot of heat because the woman was like, hey, they were like, wash with us. And then she took off the top and it was a Black woman, and then took it off and it was like a white woman. Like, people are less tolerant. Yes. I mean, again, this was like, I always say it's like what was acceptable, like think about what was acceptable in the 1920s and then 50s and 60s and 80s and even 90s. And then you're like, how did this fly? So I think the retouching has changed where it's like now we're leaning into making sure people look at kind of natural as possible. Mm-hmm. and not like another human being, because even in Instagram, like they've kind of cracked down on like people with the filters and like with mm-hmm. makeup ads and like, hey, you gotta like say that you're using false like lashes or whatever. Mm-hmm. So people know, because people can think that's real. And Absolutely. Like they can achieve those results.
Yeah. And I think Aerie is a good example of that, where they stopped retouching their models and they have blemishes mm-hmm. and body hair and all of that stuff. So it's changed a lot. I wouldn't have even like let a stray arm hair fly 10 years ago, but now.
And you see that now all the time, and which is a beautiful thing.
This is like an awesome spicy question. So whoever like put this one in, like, do you think there needs to be more transparency and compensation in our industry to help create more fairness in pay?
Yes.
100%.
Yes.
Tell them. Come ask me after. I will tell you. Get your money.
Yes. No, of course. Because it's like, and what I've liked, so when states are forcing salary requirements and like companies are actually like being like actually truthful and actually using it, correctly, it helps. Like, so you're not underselling yourself. Now, again, you're going on good faith of the company, but there's many times I've known I've gotten underpaid and that I've taken a less paycheck, and they don't go like, oh no, you're underselling. No, they'll like, oh, we'll take you. You like, Mm-mm. And it's like, and especially on like BIPOC, and minorities, like, hey, we're still not getting our due.
Yeah.
We're still not getting our due. So yes, 100%. Hell yeah.
Yeah. I have a really interesting story related to this. So like at one of the companies I was at, it was a big company that owned a mm-hmm. lot of smaller companies. The person who was doing the same position as me at another brand, a sister brand, mm-hmm. was leaving. They offered me her job, and I was like, how much were you making, if you don't mind me asking? And then it turned out that she was making almost double what I was making, and we were in the same position. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, I need this money because that's what you're paying her. Yep. But thanks to her transparency with me, I like doubled my salary at my next job because I was getting underpaid, which is like, as, like women, as people of color, like we need to do those things for each other because like no one is going to be like, psst,
yeah,
you could be getting paid $50,000 more than what you're getting paid right now. So yeah,
that's what I do for I help photographers. Like when they're submitting their bids, and sometimes I'll be like, psst, I need to resubmit that. We got money, and you can just you didn't hear from me. We got money, and I need you to just reset. Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah,
yeah,
got that budget. Please, because sometimes it's like. Again, it's like human nature of like when you're negotiating sometimes and you're on the other end and you have you want to get, hey, if we don't have to pay that much, who's going to say, yeah, we're just going to give you all this money,
right. Yeah, exactly. Here's another question. Are there any DEI tools and resources that you can recommend for navigating a global company with a Eurocentric POV that is not aligned with US DEI initiatives?
Oh, wow. I cannot, because that is not my expertise for that one. So unfortunately, I cannot for that. It's very specific. I know there's a lot of companies that, really work in that area that can go to companies to help with that. But I cannot give you that recommendation. I'm so sorry for that.
So what was the tipping point of your career and when did things really take off?
Wow. Like in a good way or a bad way? Like tipping, because that's like a two kinds would take off because there's different things. Like I would say for me personally, and it's good and bad, it was in 2020, it was George Floyd. And that just woke me up. I felt like I was asleep. My little background story of when I had to start in the industry and it was mostly dominated, white, I had to assimilate. And so when the death of George Floyd happened, for me personally, I literally just woke up. It's just weird to explain, but it's just I woke up and I was all of a sudden I was angry and I kind of saw my race and I kind of saw the injustices that was happening and I started and I was like, why am I angry all the time? And for me, that started for me going to therapy. Thank you for therapy. And it really empowered me to not just take it anymore and to really focus on working at places that I feel empowered and that I feel like my voice is heard and that I see diversity at. And that's my kind of tipping point and power call to action of what I did.
Awesome. Can you share an example from your career where you could influence and change a shoot/campaign/image? What was the issue and how did you approach it?
I think when I was working on a cookbook for Callisto Media at the time, it wasn't that I changed it, but I think we were working on an Asian cookbook and I had no experience at all. And I think for me, approaching that shoot, I made sure to ask and ask people with that knowledge to give me knowledge and make sure that I am setting up the shoot correctly, propping it out correctly without making it kitschy or making it cliche or making it offensive. That was a really learning point for me of really hey, I had to kind of step back and really take that knowledge in and overcome my biases that I thought, had and thinking, oh, this is going to be a cool shot and really being no, Karen, no. We need to do this because what you're doing this is a borderline kind of offensive of when you're setting up this shot. So I would say that.
Awesome. I'm trying to see if, all right, here. How has your experience been coming up in a time in your career where DEI wasn't really a thing?
I think I kind of answered it because it was just I just kind of accepted it. I was just assimilate it. And I was don't make any waves. I would straighten my hair all the time. I did not wear braids at all. And I just was okay, this is just how it is. You can't feel empowered. I'm not in the C-suite. I don't have a voice. And again, when George Floyd happened, boom, all of a sudden, diversity, we need everybody. We want all the people, at the same, and I was and it was kind of a weird kind the comedy because it was like all of a sudden people were like, I would like talk to my coworkers, right, every day, but all of a sudden I was like, hi Karen, I see you. Like, so it was like, whoa, it was like this weird kind of transition thing. But it, before that, it was just like I just fell into kind of like the corporate culture of like, this is what you do.
Yeah. I mean, I can remember when diversity in casting meant that you cast a brunette instead of a blonde. So, it's come a long way. Yeah. And I totally relate to that. I mean, there's so many times where you put up models that are not blonde and blue-eyed, and they would come up with like code words for why the non-white blonde models were not a fit for the brand or whatever. And then, you just got to keep barking up that tree. Luckily, that doesn't happen as much anymore, and I haven't had an experience in the past like year like that. But yeah.
Well, I will still kind of piggyback with like when, and I always go to this point, and I feel like it's always been a pivotal point of before George Floyd and after. Then there was an increase of people. Okay, we need to hire all these BIPOC, and we need to hire this, and just remember that the pendulum swung this way, and then we swung all the way this way, and to keep there has to be a balance. It's not just like it's a black story, so we need a black photographer. If it's a Latin story, you need a Latinx photographer. Remember that everyone can shoot everybody, and it's always keeping a balance and what makes sense of like when you're shooting.
Right. Yeah. And not using token people for token reasons. Right. Yes. What are some creative ways to proactively source candidates from underrepresented communities?
Like reach out to like the Diversify Photo, reach out to to organizations, schools, colleges, groups in LinkedIn or Instagram, wherever you can find them, organizations that you can reach out and say, how can we, hey, I like what you're doing. How can we partner up? And how can we start like, hey, maybe we bring people to the studio and show them what we do and like give them exposure. Or maybe if it's not like you see like there's organizations that have lists of like talented, BIPOC of photo assistants or stylists, or asking other stylists, for recommendations. Like basically just kind of going out there and just using your network and researching and finding and making that connection. And it doesn't have to come from maybe it's just like you, and it's like, hey, I found these great, people having a list, and then you can kind of draw on when you're, setting up for jobs and stuff.
Yeah. I'd also like to shout out again, Hire Black Now. We're the Black designers. And I think another aspect of it is like, don't accept just what you're being given, like push until you get what you want, because there's a level of like convenience and just not dealing with, the hurdle that you have to overcome. You do have to kind of go the extra mile if that's something you're really serious about, and it's going to take more time in your hiring process. It's going to take more time out of your day, but ultimately, if you want to build that talent pipeline that we've been talking about, it's mandatory work to do. Any advice on how to approach it and deliver your POV in the most impactful way? I'm assuming this is a question about like, if you have an issue with something that's going on set, how do you deliver that feedback?
For me, I would advise just always going to the person who's like your direct, obviously like say it's your direct, manager or whoever leader. May not be like the creative director or the overall person like on the set. Maybe it's like you're a styling, like you're a photo assistant, like going to the photographer. Kind of, I approach it going up the chain and really just, you're just pulling them aside. You're not trying to make, like a big commotion, but just really saying, hey, I see you're doing this. Is there a way we can kind of, go to the creative director and it's like, I'm seeing this and this and this. And these are the reasons why I'm thinking this is problematic. And then going to the photographer, going through your whatever the chain of command, because I always say like when you're on the set or in a situation, you want to, when you have an issue, you want to make sure everyone is cool, calm, and collected. We're not, everyone can get passionate, in an instant, but always going to the person who you feel safe, and it may not be maybe it is, you don't feel safe going to maybe your direct, person in charge, but someone who you feel safe can pass along the message. And just reiterating why, like, this may be problematic or it may cause issues. Because again, in my line of work, I always saying, like, I'm telling these, brands, like, I'm trying not to get you sued with these photos. You're happy now, and then you get sued, and then you're not happy with me. And I told you, So it's like being calm and collective and going to someone, if it's not like your direct in command, to someone who you feel safe that can pass that word along to who needs to make the decision.
Well, Karen, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you guys so much.